Understanding a philosopher is difficult, but it seems as if some philosophers never wanted to be understood. Today, we are meeting one of those people, someone who left a mark, but even that mark is as obscure as he is, Heraclitus. So now before us stands another man who speaks little but says a lot. Xenophanes was a poet. And this one, it's as if he speaks in riddles.
Heraclitus was a thinker who refused to speak plainly. He never used words directly. He would imply, he would beckon, but he would never fully arrive at the place he was called to.
But why does he act so mysteriously? I mean, people already have a hard time understanding philosophers. And if on top of that you say, I am darkness, what is anyone supposed to do with you?
Maybe he never wanted anyone to claim him anyway. He came from an aristocratic family in Ephesus, but he kept his distance from the people. He wrote a book, but it doesn't even have a title. Some called him the Dark One, because what he said was not clear. But maybe we had just gotten too used to things being clear.
It was really great to start off with someone so dark. The viewers are immediately going to say, what is this channel even talking about?
Heraclitus didn't speak so that everyone would understand him anyway. He wrote only for those who intended to understand. He said these words are for those who speak with their thoughts, not with what they see.
So once again, we're faced with a selective philosopher.
No, just with someone who reminds us that thinking is something that requires effort.
Heraclitus' thought was not just a philosophical system, but also a perspective. According to him, truth emerged not through clarity, but through movement, transformation, and flow. That's why he used words not to draw clear lines, but to prod at the uncertainty within us. It was not easy to understand, but perhaps the very act of trying to understand was itself that truth. This solitary man wandering the narrow streets of Ephesus looked at the universe and whispered this: nothing is fixed, everything is in motion. And perhaps that is why the history of philosophy began to change with him. Because Heraclitus thought not only about what exists, but that what exists is in a state of constant change. He said that even a stone, a thought, or a person can never remain the same. But does everything really change? Is change a law of nature, or is it merely a perception? Now it's time to pursue this question. Heraclitus's most well-known but least understood saying is that you cannot step into the same river twice.
I think there isn't anyone left who hasn't heard this phrase. You cannot step into the same river twice. What does this sentence mean? Why doesn't he speak more plainly?
Because even the sentence itself is flowing, even as it stands still. In Heraclitus' philosophy, change is not just a characteristic, it is the very essence of existence. Everything flows. So, according to Heraclitus, flow is not something unique to liquids.
I'm not even sure if I understand anything, but go on.
That's normal. It's a topic that can be confusing to grasp. We are that river. So it's not just the external world that changes. You can't step into the same water or the same self twice. You are flowing too. And maybe that's why we can never fully know who we are.
But that's really exhausting. I mean, if everything is constantly changing, what can we rely on? A little stability would be nice, in my opinion.
According to Heraclitus, the only thing that's constant is change itself. He said that everything is in a state of becoming. And this becoming doesn't point to an end result, but to a constant movement.
So, in fact, we are never really quite the same person at all.
And no thought is ever completely finished. That's why, according to Heraclitus, knowledge is not an accumulation, but an awareness.
So, all these conversations are flowing as well. These chairs, these words, us, all of them change and become different over time.
And maybe what we call philosophy is the courage to accept that things change.
I mean, let's admit it, choosing fire as the foundation of the universe is a bit radical. Water, okay, even air would make sense. But fire, it's a bit like a let's burn the world philosophy.
But for Heraclitus, fire is not a metaphor for destruction, but for becoming. It's not about burning, but about transforming. Fire is the symbol of everything that is not static. It doesn't stay fixed, it doesn't remain the same. And that's exactly why it represents the universe.
But let me say something. Even fire itself doesn't stay still. The flame is always flickering. I mean, it exists, but it's not fixed. Is that philosophical too?
Absolutely. According to Heraclitus, what we call being is not a fixed substance, but a process of change. Fire is the clearest expression of this process. It both exists and ceases to exist at the same time. Just like thought, just like a human being.
So, the universe is like a fireplace.
Yes, but it is not known who is throwing the wood.
See, I like that. But I still feel like defending water. Water is calm, fire is aggressive. Why isn't it a less tense element?
because according to Heraclitus, calmness can be deceptive. What is real is what moves, what contains opposites. Fire never stops, and neither does the universe.
So, change is not only inevitable, but also necessary.
And maybe what we call philosophy is the courage to accept that you are changing.
All right, now I have a word in my hand. Logos, and it doesn't inspire any confidence. Is it both word and reason, both order and like God?
For Heraclitus, logos is the principle of everything. It is the order, reason, and harmony operating behind the universe. But this order is not as it appears. It exists in everything, but very few people notice it.
So, Logos is there, but we can't see it?
Yes. Heraclitus says that logos governs everything, but people are unaware of it. Because people look at the surface, while logos is in the depths. It's not hidden, it's visible, but unseen.
So it's not exactly hiding itself, but still, no one really notices. That sounds a bit moody, I suppose.
Not moody, patient. Logos operates in everything. In nature, in thought, in human relationships. But to hear it, an inner silence is required. And people are often very noisy.
This is a bit like God, but not quite. It sets the rules but doesn't speak, is everywhere but unseen.
Because logos is not personal, it's universal. It's more of a process than a god, and perhaps even deeper than the gods, because it even encompasses them.
So what do we do with this logo? I mean, how are we supposed to speak to it, or will we even be able to listen?
According to Heraclitus, everyone lives within the logos, but few are aware that they do. That's why philosophy isn't about learning something new, but about realizing what you already know.
So, here's what I understand so far. Heraclitus doesn't understand everyone, and no one understands him. So is this philosophy, or is it just passive-aggressive loneliness?
He was lonely. But this loneliness didn't come from withdrawing from others, it came from thinking too much. Heraclitus was never part of a community, he didn't found a school. He withdrew from the city, because the city was noisy and he was searching for silence.
But it sounds like he was speaking from a bit of a high horse, doesn't it? I mean, saying the people don't understand, everyone is blind and so on. That seems a bit much to me.
Because what upset him the most was that people chose not to think. Attaining knowledge was difficult, but people didn't choose the difficult path. He says that people don't grasp what's in front of them, and even if they learn, they don't understand.
I mean, in his own way he's right, but part of me also thinks maybe you're explaining it wrong.
But he spoke knowing he might be misunderstood. He didn't want to be too clear, because clarity often leads to superficiality. Yet he wanted to preserve what was deep.
Still, it's a bit harsh. You know, it's hard to talk to someone who says, I said it, but you wouldn't understand.
Heraclitus didn't converse. He would state things and then withdraw. Not so that those who wanted to understand would come, but so that only those who were already there would remain.
Look, now, this guy really likes contradiction. He says everything flows, and then he says nothing exists on its own. Then he says war is the father of all things. So, is the universe chaos?
No, the universe is harmony. But that harmony is born not from silence, but from conflict. According to Heraclitus, opposites are the foundation of the universe. If there were no night, we wouldn't be able to recognize day. If there were no illness, health would be meaningless.
So, does that mean we can only understand what's good after experiencing bad things?
Yes. Heraclitus says that life and death, wakefulness and sleep, youth and old age transform into one another, because the opposite of everything is its complement. Opposites not only clash, but also create order.
Then why is there so much conflict? If there is order, why isn't there peace?
Because people mistake opposition for conflict. But according to Heraclitus, conflict is not just about destruction, but about transformation. Balance is hidden within conflict. Just like a bow, without tension, there is no sound.
So, all this noise is actually a sign of real harmony?
Sometimes, yes, what appears to be chaos on the surface may actually contain symmetry within.
Then maybe what we call peace is, in a sense, just the period of calmness after the noise.
And maybe silence is the result of the harshest conflict.
Look, up until now, change, fire, opposition, all that is fine, but when it comes to the subject of God, things get different. Because Heraclitus says somewhere that there is a difference between God and humans, but people cannot see this. So who is this God?
Heraclitus' God is not personal. He has no form, no voice, but is everywhere. To understand him is not to see him, but to think with him.
So, is it a kind of divine thought?
Logos itself is a divine process. Everything happens through it, but people mistake their own desires for the voice of God. Heraclitus says that the gods regard day and night as the same, but people cannot see the difference.
That's a bit frightening. So, does God exist on a different scale?
Yes, our understanding is limited. But God sees the wholeness beyond those limits. A person walks in darkness, but God is the darkness itself.
So then, where is humanity's place? Are we just observers?
No. But there are very few of us who actually try to understand. According to Heraclitus, most people do not seek refuge in God, they imitate him. They mistake their own anger for God's wrath, their own desires for God's plan.
So we're not talking to God, but to our own reflection.
And sometimes that mirror doesn't reflect anything at all. Because seeing the truth isn't just about wanting it, you also have to be ready for it.
I'm seriously asking, why didn't this guy form proper sentences? I mean, there's neither an explanation nor any conjunctions. It's like they just cut random sentences out of someone's notebook and stuck them on the wall.
Because according to Heraclitus, thought is never complete. Thought is a flow. That's why his sentences don't flow, they jump, they leave things incomplete, they don't finish. Because finishing something puts an end to thinking.
But this is really exhausting. I mean, I'm reading, and in one line he says everything flows. In another, he says war is the father of all things. There's no connection. This isn't a philosopher, it's like a Twitter user.
But Heraclitus was one of the first thinkers to realize that thought is not always a straight line. There is also a silence to words. Sometimes saying nothing conveys more than saying everything.
You've started speaking ambiguously under the influence of Heraclitus too. Is this ambiguity intentional?
Yes, Heraclitus leaves the meaning to the reader. He merely strikes the spark. The flame is kindled in your own mind.
Is that why they call him the dark philosopher?
Yes, but that darkness is not a lack, it's an intensity. Not every light reveals everything. Sometimes you need to get used to the dark in order to see.
So, sometimes saying little is meant to make you think a lot.
And perhaps the deepest thoughts are expressed with the fewest words.
Sometimes we think he's obscure, not because he's hard to understand, but because we don't want to understand. Because things that are very clear give us comfort. But Heraclitus's sentences unsettle us a little.
Because within those sentences, we find ourselves. Our uncertainty, our transience, our conflicts. Heraclitus's darkness is actually our shadow side.
But people don't want to think in such shades of grey. It's either white or black. It's either right or wrong. But Heraclitus seems to say it's both right and wrong.
Because life is like that too. Only the simple things can be clear-cut, but depth begins with uncertainty.
So, is darkness a kind of honesty?
Yes. For Heraclitus, being dark doesn't come from not being clear, but from trying to say everything at once. Because the truth can't fit into a single sentence.
But people are looking for light, clarity, guiding statements.
And Heraclitus did not become the light, because light dazzles the eyes. He chose darkness, because the eyes that want to see must first get used to it.
Now I understand him a little better. Maybe his words were a mirror of our silence.
And maybe he never spoke to anyone, but he said something to all of us.
After all these sentences, I feel like none of them are actually complete. As if what Heraclitus didn't say belongs to us just as much as what he did say.
Because his language was not just to convey information, but to spark thought. He was not a guide, but a confuser of directions.
So, is a philosopher someone who confuses things even more?
Sometimes yes. Because real answers are not the ones that are easily accessible. Heraclitus valued not understanding, but the intention to understand.
But still, I wonder, if he were alive today, in the midst of all these screens, this speed, and all these comments, what would Heraclitus say?
He would probably speak in a single sentence. But that sentence would echo when we fall silent. The way up and the way down are one and the same.
So maybe the place we're going is actually the starting point.
Or what we think is the beginning is just a moment in transformation.
Let's stay here for a while. Let's not say anything. Because sometimes to understand, you need to be silent.
For those who wish to stay, we'll share the next silence together.
So, if being is one, how can we think about it without dividing it?
Some questions are now answered by Parmenides.
Heraclitus's voice is still obscure today, but maybe darkness is just another way to relearn how to see. Do you think we are still in the same river, or have we already flowed somewhere else?